Hi, I'm Matt Barry. I'm an independent filmmaker, and this is Low Budget Visions, where we celebrate personal DIY independent filmmaking. Today, I'm joined by Caleb Robinson, who is a part of the folk filmmaking community that I connected with through YouTube a few years ago. It's a real pleasure to speak with Caleb. This is the first time we've kind of spoken in person, or at least virtually here. Um, and I just finished rewatching a film that Caleb directed called Hotel, which I think is a really interesting film, enjoyed quite a lot. And that's going to be what we talk about today. But before we do, I'd like Caleb, if you could just introduce yourself and, tell people who you are.
Yeah, of course. I'm Caleb Robinson. I'm a filmmaker based out of Yakima, Washington. I've directed three feature films up to this point. My first feature was Living with Trevor, and then a few years after that, I directed a movie called Not So Amazing. And then my third feature was Hotel, which is what we're talking about today. So, yeah, I kind of stumbled into filmmaking in a way. I've always loved movies. I've always been just super, super, super into film. And so starting out, I started by making movie reviews on YouTube, and I felt very uncomfortable doing that. I kind of did it because I just felt like that was the only thing I could do with my life in the movie sphere that would be considered valid. And it took a few years, but eventually I realized, why don't I just make movies instead of criticizing other people's movies? Why don't I just make movies? And so I took down all those videos because I hate them. It's just a little kid trying to like be a film critic, and I hate those videos. So they're down now. But I took those down and I wrote what would become Living with Trevor, and the rest is kind of history. I just kind of went at it from the perspective of like, I'm either going to be miserable or I'm going to do what I want to do. So I'm just going to make feature films, and YouTube was already a platform I was on, so it just made sense to start putting those on YouTube. And I didn't even really discover the folk filmmaking movement till after Not So Amazing. So I had been doing this for 5, 6 years, and then I realized, oh my God, all these other people are doing the same thing. This is awesome. Like I didn't have that like come to Jesus moment until that point. I didn't know that there was this whole other world out there on YouTube.
Well, that's great how it all came together and really how this, there was kind of this community of filmmakers who really found each other. And,
Yeah.
something you were just saying that I find interesting is you were talking about putting these early videos of yours, the film reviews, onto YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's funny, as you were saying that, I just found myself thinking about, I guess, the difference of when you are starting out in a time when you had access to this, to the platform of putting your work out into the world. And it's funny because it's something that I guess, coming from in the 90s, it wasn't really, there was no way to share these earliest efforts with people, whatever that, whether it was like, you're talking about film reviews or people making short films or whatever, there would be no
Yeah.
real way to share that. So I think it's an interesting experience that you had, that I couldn't have had, where you were
Yeah.
able to put these film or videos out into the world through YouTube. And it
Yeah.
sounds like you had an interesting process of looking back at those, and kind of seeing how you've grown and being dissatisfied with what you'd been doing earlier.
Yeah. It none of it rang true, and I was kind of just masking and putting on what I grew up on Chris Stuckman movie reviews and Jeremy Johns movie reviews and stuff like that as a kid. So I was trying to emulate them, and I didn't really understand what film criticism was or what I thought it should be. So I just kind of, I mean, I ripped movies to shreds that everyone else ripped to shreds. I talked highly of movies that everyone else talked highly of. Like I was just kind of a sheep. I wasn't forming my own opinions. I was trying to be a movie reviewer on YouTube, and I think a lot of people back in that day were doing the same thing, and I just kind of jumped on the bandwagon. And luckily, it didn't really take off, so I don't have to sit here and be like, "Man, I'm super embarrassed about those videos," because like nobody saw them. But I did it. I did it vigorously for like 2 years. Like I was uploading 3 times a week for like 2 years straight. So I was really trying. I was really trying there to make that happen. But I'm glad it didn't. I'm glad it didn't because it wouldn't have been authentic to who I am. So
So looking back on it, you feel like that. played a part in kind of shaping where you went with film and video?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and like when I mean, I'm sure you've had this as a filmmaker, but like when you make movies, you see film criticism completely differently because you understand the process and what pre-Caleb would have been like, oh man, that was a really annoying, obnoxious, exhausting movie becomes like that really just wasn't my cup of tea, but like I can't believe all those people poured their hearts into that movie. Like you get a newfound respect for cinema when you make your own movies. And I had that with Living with Trevor. That was like my big like, oh my God, I'm so glad I'm not reviewing movies anymore. And like I think film criticism is completely valid and necessary. I just think one of the negative things that's come from YouTube, I think, is like really toxic film criticism and like I don't know, you got like the Cinema Sins crowd and like the all those channels that like monetize just ripping movies to shreds for entertainment purposes and like that's fine, people enjoy that stuff. I can't enjoy that content because I make movies, so so it's all that stuff comes off very obnoxious to me now.
Oh yeah, definitely
But
having the experience of making films gives you a certain sympathy toward what I think all filmmakers go through. I'm curious, as you
yeah.
were watching, YouTube, and not I don't even just mean film reviews, but just all the videos that were available out there. Did you feel that YouTube also played an important part in exposing you to a lot of different types of films, like from world cinema and classic cinema that you might not otherwise have found?
Not for me in my experience. No, I'm still, the crazy thing is I am still on my journey of like discovering a lot of older cinema and world cinema. Like I'm not I'm not like unbeknownst to any of that, but like I'm very very well versed in like early 2000s indie film. That's like that's where I draw a lot of my inspiration. That's like my favorite era of filmmaking. In a lot of ways I feel like I missed the boat by being born when I was born because I think a lot of the movies I'm making now would have a bigger audience in 2006 than 2024 and stuff. But I definitely like I've been recently really putting a lot of intention into trying to watch more Korean films. I just watched Long Day's Journey into Night the other night. That movie that has like that super long 3D take at the end of the movie. That film was incredible. But yeah, I YouTube isn't what brought me into that. My just being a filmmaker and trying to take in as much art as I can, not just film, but just art in general, has led me down that path. So, but I'm still early on. That's the thing. Like I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like pretend like I'm super well versed because I'm not. I'm still discovering films every day.
Yeah, it really is a lifelong journey of exploration and just seeing as much as you can. Yeah, it's something
Yeah.
I'm always kind of struck by myself over the years, is where my interest will lead me into all sorts of different types of films that I previously might not have paid much attention to. It's interesting you were talking about the early 2000s being such a key moment in terms of your interest in film. Are there any particular movies that you would cite as a big inspiration, or something that you still kind of look to as a model in making your own movies from that period?
My absolute favorite indie film of all time is The Puffy Chair, the Duplass brothers movie, The Puffy Chair. In fact, like the Duplass brothers, their entire filmography is like I just love it. All of their movies I adore. But yeah, I mean, I'm a big Duplass brothers guy. I'm a big Joe Swanberg guy. The entire like mumblecore movement is super inspirational to me. I look at those movies a lot. And just in the way that like a lot of those movies are shot on handy cams, some of them even on tape, and they still hook you and they still grab your attention and I still get invested and stuff. And like that, the puffy chair opened my eyes to that when I was making Living with Trevor, where when I first started shooting that movie, we had a hard drive crash where I lost all of my footage, and it was
Mm.
actually a blessing because the first block of shooting for Living with Trevor, I was really, really, really trying to emulate like Clerks and Kevin Smith style blocking, and I was pulling up shots from Clerks and trying to recreate them. Like it was not working. And then I watched The Puffy Chair, which is like a movie shot on a handy cam where Jay Duplass is just running around grabbing shots and stuff, and I realized like I'm overthinking this entire thing. I just need to shoot what I think works, and the style's going to come from that. And that's what I love about that entire era of film is like of indie film. It's just so freeing, and you just kind of throw all of the Hollywood standards out the window, and you focus on story and character, and because of all of that, it becomes cinematic. Like a handy cam visually isn't inherently cinematic, but it becomes cinematic because of what you do with it in those movies. So I tried to apply that same type of logic to Hotel, where I intentionally shot that movie on an iPhone because I wanted it to feel more intimate and less cinematic. But yeah, I don't know. I pull a lot of inspiration from that era.
Well, that's a great point about the technology and how freeing that is. And I think it just continues to become more and more true. And I think it's
Yeah,
important. Something I think about a lot actually is it's important not to lose sight of what all these different tools like, an iPhone or any, good smartphone camera can provide, because there are a lot of, I sometimes hear kind of disparaging comments about shooting on smartphones and everything, but certainly, I mean, Hotel is a great example of just how good a film can look shot on that, and also that it allows you to do things to find these kind of intimate approaches and working in the space of the hotel room and everything that might
yeah.
not be, as practical with larger equipment. So I think there's
Yeah,
a lot of possibilities. Yeah.
there are shots in Hotel that I wouldn't have been able to get in our standard setup. Because like Nathan and I, my partner with RC Films, we have religiously for the past as long as we've been making movies under the RC Films name, we've been using a Canon T2i for everything. And I love that camera. That's my baby. That's my favorite. I go to that camera all the time. But like with Hotel, I was able to get shots that I wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. Like the shot of our main character Travis sitting at the window, the shot that's like his single, that shot would not have been possible in the way that it is on a different camera. That was the ultra wide lens on the iPhone, and it's cool because you get really up close and intimate with his face, but you also get the entire hotel room in the background. So yeah, I mean, the iPhone is a really, really cool tool. It's a really cool tool in your filmmaking arsenal.
Yeah, for sure. You did some really great things with it in Hotel. I mean, the look of that is really impressive. And actually, I want to talk more about that in just a minute. But before we go on, I wanted to ask you, because I wasn't entirely clear. Before you made Living with Trevor, had you, and between that and the video reviews you had done previously, had between those two, had you done short films or did you jump right in with features?
I jumped right in with features.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was scary, but and like a lot of people ask me like why I did that, and I don't know. I can't even really answer that. I just kind of did it. I don't it felt right. The way I've looked at it is like short films versus feature films. It's just canvas sizes. And the story I was writing at that point in time, Living with Trevor, was definitely a bigger canvas. It wasn't going to fit into a little short film. So I decided to just say screw it and make it into a feature. And that's just kind of how I've been this whole time is I'm not writing movies specifically to hit that 80-minute runtime or anything. I'm just writing what I want to write, and the runtime just happens kind of. So I don't know. I'm not opposed to making short films. I actually, one of my favorite things that I've made is a short film. I made a documentary of Nathan, me, and the Doom Boys going down to meet Dan Lotz for the first time. And that's one of my favorite things that I've made up to this point, and that's 20 minutes. So I just kind of go with the flow. Whatever happens from pen to paper is what the runtime's going to be.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I remember that film. I believe there were a couple of films made of that meetup. I can't remember if Dan had one as well, but I know.
Dan shot a bunch of stuff when we were down there.
Okay,
Yeah, they haven't released any of it yet, but yeah.
gotcha. So I do remember seeing yours. I think was the meetup. Was it called? I've forgotten the exact title.
Yeah, meetup number one.
Meetup number
It's
one.
just
Yeah.
yeah, it's just I wanted to emulate Super 8 film. It was like an experiment with the T2i to see how far I could push that camera to emulate a certain film stock. And we were going on this big adventure together, so it felt like the perfect time to just try that. And yeah, it's a bunch of footage of us going to the airport over the 2 days before we went to go see Dan put to classical music. That's the entire thing. But that's one of my favorite things I've made, and it's 20 minutes. So I'm just like whatever canvas size I need for a story is what I go with.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. And it's interesting, like you said about living with Trevor, that you from the start, envisioned this as a bigger project, something that would require the feature length. But like you also said, you're not just trying to hit an arbitrary number to push it to that either. So I
Yeah,
think, I think that's something with all your films that I've seen, and I think I've seen all the features on. It was the three features on YouTube.
yeah,
They really are they're fleshed out. They really feel like a whole. There's a totality to them in terms of your how you conceived of it, and yeah, justifies the running time. In fact, it's one of the things that really impressed me about Hotel. Watching it again was that you have this. It's basically this conversation that makes up the majority of the film,
hmm
and just how many different directions that it takes and how rich that gets. I wanted to ask you, sort of as a transition into talking about Hotel.
yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about how the idea came to be, and then how you and Nathan, who co-wrote the film, how you developed that into the script that we see?
Yeah, absolutely. So right after we released Not So Amazing, a movie that killed me, it was like what it was so big and mentally way too much for me to handle. I will never make a movie that big with no money ever again. That movie crushed me. I was like exhausted from just life in general after we released that movie. I love it. It killed me. Nathan and I, though, that's right. Like I said, that's right when we discovered the folk filmmaking movement. And through that, we stumbled onto, I think the first movie we watched of Doom's was Oh Brother. And then we watched House. And then we watched October. We just really started levitating towards Doom Productions movies. They were one of the first ones that jumped out to us. And then Nathan had an epiphany moment because he was just scrolling through and he realized, oh my God, they're in Portland, Oregon, which is literally 3 hours away from us. And we were like, oh my God, we need to reach out and like set up a meetup because they had seen our movies and we had seen theirs and we had no idea that we were that close to each other at that time. So we planned a meetup to go see Jordan and Ethan, and we hung out with them for a few days. And they had just when we went to meet them, they had just I think the movie they had just released was October, which is a movie they shot over a month. And they have a whole video on their channel about how they did that in a month. But that energy over the course of those 2 days rubbed off on me really, really hard. And Nathan and I had just got done making Not So Amazing, which was a 2.5 year endeavor of just like nonstop work. And on that drive home from having hung out with Jordan and Ethan, I just kind of like mumbled to Nathan, like, what if we like did a 3 day shoot instead of a 2.5 year? Like, what if we just like made a really small movie? And like just kind of healed ourselves through that. And that drive home just kept unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. And eventually I just brought up this old idea I had for a movie that was originally going to be like my original idea for this movie came back when I was making Living with Trevor. And it was going to be about a dude in a hotel room who hires a prostitute to just hang out with him and talk with him. And Nathan, I put that out there as an idea I had that might be able to be done in like just a 3 or 4 day shoot. Um, and then we evolved it into what if we like what if we did one character and we did a phone sex operator instead of a prostitute so that we'd have this really interesting dynamic of like there's another character in the movie but we never see her, and what would that look like? And it just kept evolving over that 3 hour drive home. And then once we got back, it was pretty clear, okay, we're gonna do this. We are gonna make this movie. And like literally a week later, we had written the first draft of the script. So it all happened really fast, and it was like one of the most healing, refreshing experiences I've had making a movie because it deconstructed everything that I had taught myself about filmmaking up to that point. That like you got to really take your time. You gotta like go. You gotta have all these different set pieces. You gotta really make it this big thing. And like it, Not So Amazing and Living with Trevor needed that. Those movies did need that because that's what those movies are. But Hotel, it was just so nice to focus on just a two character dynamic in a room over the course of one night. Like it was going from like this massive movie to just like this tiny little drama, and it was super cool. And I had always wanted to make a drama. I had been building up to that point where like I felt like I had earned making a drama, because for me, drama as a genre is one of the hardest genres to work within because it's very easily unintentionally funny. Like you have to be really good at what you're doing to make a drama that an audience engages with in the way that you're wanting them to. So I started out with comedies because comedy is a much easier thing to get started on. I think most filmmakers start with either comedy or horror because those two genres are really easy to get your feet wet. And but both of my comedies, Not So Amazing and Living with Trevor, have dramatic elements. So I had been slowly trying to implement that stuff into my movies to build up to that point where I could finally feel like I can make a drama and make it work. And that's what Hotel became. So Nathan and I wrote it over the course of a couple months, and then we were shooting pretty much. I'm trying to think of the timeline. We finished the script and then we did rehearsals for a couple months, and then we started filming in December of 2021, I want to say, or 22. I'm foggy on what year it was, but it was just a 3 day shoot and then one extra shoot for one little reshoot we needed to do. And that was it. And that was such a good feeling to just get an entire feature film done in that span of time.
I can imagine. I mean, it sounds like this is an idea that just came together so quickly. It sounds like you really,
Yeah.
the vision just, came to you. And then you also just as quickly found out, how can I do this? How can I make this idea into a reality? And that's great when
Yeah.
that happens. And
Yeah.
like you said, it's very freeing. It sounds like it's relaxing, kind of coming down off of these much more involved productions that you were doing right before.
Yeah.
I want to say real quick, I'm glad that you mentioned the process of rehearsing the actors, because that is something I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about. I think the performances are so strong, and I was curious what that looked like. If you could describe a little bit about, well, first of all, how
Yeah.
you cast the film, and then also what those rehearsals looked like.
So we had been up to that point very close friends with a guy named David who ended up playing Travis in the movie. And he's always been incredibly talented. We had just kind of been looking for the right time to put him in. Like we were kind of just searching for the right role for him. He was in Not So Amazing in a very comedic role. But Nathan and I both knew that he could do so much more. So Nathan had the idea of like, let's reach out to David and see if he wants to do this. And like within a day of that drive back to Yakima, we had David casted. And then the hardest casting was finding the actress to play Jessie because that's a very hard ask of anybody, and it's even harder when it's just two straight white dudes coming at you like, "Hey, can we have you read these lines?" And we had a few of our actress friends turn us down, and they were very respectful, and we were very respectful to them, but like turned us down because of the content of what we were asking of them. But then I just made a post or yeah, I made a post on Facebook and didn't get a lot of traction. And then Riley, this woman who had known a bunch of the people that worked on Not So Amazing, she messaged the RC Films Facebook page, and she was just like, "Hey, I really loved Not So Amazing. Some of my friends were in that movie, and I just thought it was super cool. I would love to work with you guys if there's anything coming up." And Nathan and I were just like, "Oh my God, oh my God." Like she messaged us right like when we had a leading female role lined up that we were looking for, and we pitched it to her, and like 30 seconds later she sent us a voice clip over Facebook Messenger of her reading the first Jesse line, and we were just like, okay, okay, if you are willing to do it, you have the part. Like there's no audition, you have the part. And the rest was history with that. We had our two actors lined up, and that was it. And then we just started rehearsing once a week for like 2 or 3 months. And that was very important because Hotel is not an improv movie, it's all scripted. So that was like incredibly necessary. And that's something that up to that point I hadn't done well in the past. Like I hadn't done a lot of rehearsing for my movies. And one of the lessons I learned through Not So Amazing was like rehearsing would have probably cut that experience down by like 3 months, 4 months. Like, so I need to put more time into rehearsals going forward. So that was incredible, at least for like movies with a lot of dialogue. I think rehearsals are incredibly necessary. So,
That's a really good point, and I have to say, not to interrupt, but I have to say, I think
no,
it's
good.
something that is really not emphasized enough in a lot of low budget, indie production because of course everybody's schedules are tight, and I think sometimes it feels like just getting everybody together on that one day on the set, just so you can actually film the thing is a challenge enough. But I think you're right. If you can find the time to do those rehearsals, it's something I always wish that, I've had projects in the past. I've always wished I had more time for that, and that just kind of the stars or at least the schedules would align in a way that I could do it. And so hearing about your experience with this, I think it really drives that point home that when you're working with a fully scripted project like Hotel and where the characters and the dialogue are so richly drawn, it sounds like the rehearsal process was really essential to the final film.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, yeah, and like we still had to like do mini rehearsals when we were on set because the script is just all dialogue, so you forget certain things. But like David and Riley by that point had gone through the whole song and dance so many times of going rehearsing the entire script like a stage play so many times that like we were able to get those scenes done super quick. Like you would think that we were sitting there working on each scene for like 3 hours, but in reality it was like I don't know. I always get more than one take for safety, but like very rarely would I need more than three takes. Very rarely. I it they were incredible. Best experience I've ever had with actors ever. They're both incredible.
Well, that's great. I mean, it really shows in the film. I think their performances are, as I said, really strong, and
Yeah.
they reach a lot of the depths of these characters and their experiences that we learn about over the course of the film.
hmm
Now, I realize I'm not sure how much you want to share about this, but can you talk at all about finding the location that you used and
hmm
about that process?
It was literally just about it was a combination of how expensive the hotel room was because we didn't want to drop a ton of money on this movie. We had a pretty strict budget that we wanted to stay under. So it was finding a cheap hotel room that we could get locked down for that many days back to back to back. And one that we and like this is like the legal gray area of making indie films, but like one that we could sneak people into the hotel room because you're not supposed to have as many people as we had in that room. like
Right.
like we had our whole crew up there. We had like 8 people in that hotel room. But so it was a combination of a lot of things, but that hotel doesn't have an elevator. It just has a staircase. It was very easy to get Riley, David, and everybody up to the room without making a huge ruckus, without the hotel staff wondering what we're doing. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, that hotel is like a favorite of ours in Yakima. It was a very easy process. The hardest part with the hotel room was that reshoot because the hotel rooms all look slightly different there, and so I had to a month later uh get one more night at that hotel room and beg them to give me a specific room. because
Yeah.
yeah, David and I had to go back and reshoot his monologue at the end of the movie. And that was just like that was super stressful because it felt like, man, if they don't give us that room back, this whole movie falls apart. Like
Yeah.
we need to get that exact room back. And we did, thankfully. But yeah.
Now, remind me, I believe you already mentioned, but how long did you spend with the principal photography in the room? Was it over
Three nights
3 nights?
back to back to back, and then the one more shoot for the reshoot. And that was
Okay,
it.
that's great. That really is a nice tight schedule.
Yeah.
That yeah. I want to say real quick, it's interesting just thinking about the title of the film, Hotel, and
Yeah.
how central that location is, not just because it's where the film is set, but really how it becomes this meeting point between these two characters where their lives intersect for, what is it, the 3 hours or whatever for one night.
Yeah.
Um, did you, when you were looking at the hotel rooms, again, I realized you were looking at them based on, price and availability and everything,
Hmm.
but did you find yourself really thinking of the room itself as like a character in the movie and really finding yourself paying attention to all these little details and what was unique about the room?
Yeah, the hotel room is absolutely the secret third character in that movie. I approached it though from the angle of I'm gonna work with what I get. So we didn't go and scout. We didn't do anything. We looked at pictures on Google when we were like when we were deciding what hotel room to use. But yeah, I mean, I we got into that hotel room and my brain just automatically started the cog started turning and I figured out how I was going to shoot that room. So it wasn't a super thought out process. It was just like I just went with my gut. Um, the only thing that we had to compromise on with the room is in the script, there's a scene where, and it's the scene where Travis is sitting at the window. Originally, he was going to be on a balcony, and that was going to be like our super cinematic, a super cinematic shot of him like outside smoking a cigarette on the balcony. Um, and we just ended up cutting that because obviously the room we got didn't have a balcony. And it honestly worked out more in my favor as a director because one thing I really wanted to do with the movie is like keep Travis trapped in that hotel room until he takes the initiative and leaves at the end. So it worked that there wasn't a balcony. The balcony would have gone slightly against what I wanted the movie to feel like. So I didn't want the I think we would have felt a little bit too much freedom by him being on that balcony.
Yeah, I've got to say
So
that's an example where the limitations actually work to your advantage, I think, because I
yeah,
have to agree, just as a viewer, I think it's the sense of isolation in,
yeah,
in being in that room and almost that sense that he's running away from something and that room there is that sense of being trapped in it. And I think you're right that the
yeah,
balcony would have been a little too freeing, perhaps. It might have
yeah,
worked against that to some extent. So I think even though that was a limitation initially, I think it worked out in your favor in the end.
yeah. Agreed. I'm really happy with it in retrospect.
I'm curious about one other thing from a production design standpoint. Did you introduce any kind of outside props into the hotel room? I mean, or I know there's like some, menus and the Bible in the drawer and everything, or were those all things that you actually found in the location?
So the menu was in the hotel room already. We got the phone from Walmart, the phone that he uses to call Jesse. The Bible was a prop because that we called the hotel before we went to shoot there and we asked them if they have Bibles in their rooms and they said no. And like for Nathan and I, screenplay wise, that was a very important image for us, like the contrast of like the holy bible is right there and then he calls a phone sex hotline, we really wanted that image. So we had to find a bible and I think we also had to find the phone book, or maybe it was just the phone book. I can't actually remember which. I think it was both. I think it was both. But I remember the phone book was really hard to get because in modern day there aren't a lot of phone books. You
That's
gotta like
true. Yeah.
order one directly, which takes like months for it to get here, or you just ask around. And Nathan was able, his grandma had one, so it worked out. But
It reminds me, I filmed a short movie in a motel once, and I also had to provide my own Bible. I had a similar
Yeah.
experience with it. Funny enough.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, so no, it's great to hear about how you were able to use a lot of the existing space, the materials in it, but also being able to think ahead like that with the bits of production design. Shooting on the iPhone inside that room. Well, first of all, what did your crew look like? I mean, how many different? You said you had 8 people. Did that include the cast? And what were the technical positions that you needed to film?
So technical wise, we had me, obviously, like I was manning the camera. Nathan was our audio guy for those shoots. And most of it was on lav, so it was just ensuring that the Zoom recorder was going and getting David laved up correctly. And then we had Riley and David as the actors. Riley brought her fiance at the time, Izzy, and he just kind of helped in general with the mood. He was there to support Riley, but he was all like he lightened the mood when things got stressful or exhausting or whatever. He lightened the mood, and then my now ex-wife, but at the time wife, was there as a producer, also just helping around the set. Nathan's girlfriend was there to help around the set, and that was basically and it fluctuated. It wasn't all those people all at the same time. It there were times where like my wife and Nathan's girlfriend decided to dip for a day or whatever when they realized that there wasn't much for them to do. So like I think the second and third shoot was just me, Nathan, Riley, David, and then Izzy. I think it was just those five people for the last two shoots. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean technical wise, like Nathan and I were fine. Like just audio and visual, we had it down, and then I was directing. So
I guess this is kind of a general question. I mean, not necessarily about hotels specifically, but do you find on a shoot, especially with like your more complicated, involved shoots with your previous features, do you find that there is such a thing as having too many people on the set? Do you almost find that it can become more, maybe more chaotic that way?
absolutely. Like that's a controversial take for me that like I've gone into arguments with people over. But I really think one of the biggest enemies of low budget filmmaking is this really, in my opinion, I'm just going to be blunt, stupid idea that Hollywood plants into your head that you have to pack your set. You have to have a gaffer. You have to have a script supervisor. You have to have a caterer. You have to have all of these things to be considered a film set. And it's like, no, no, you have to have someone to man the camera. You have to have someone to do audio. If you can get those people and make sure they're there for every shoot, then sure. But putting yourself in that corner is ridiculous to me. I will never ever understand that where it's like I have to have these people every shoot, and if they're not available, then I just have to reschedule. It's like you need to have the most minimal crew that you can do with your film project so that you can schedule those shoots easier because
Yeah, I think that's yeah. I'm
it's
sorry, go ahead.
already hard enough. It's already hard enough as it is to schedule things.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that's a really sound idea because as always, scheduling, especially at the low budget level, that is kind of the bane of our existence. I think is just trying to get everybody together at the same time in the same place, and
Yep.
relying on having that many people. Yeah, that is a major challenge. Now, kind of going back to this idea of shooting on the iPhone, there was just one other follow up I wanted to ask you about that. Aside from the phone itself, were you, I assume you had some sort of a tripod that you were using. Were there any
Yep.
other camera, like little dolly wheels or anything else any other gear that you were introducing into that location?
Nope, it was just our tripod, and then I did handheld for some of it.
Okay.
So that was it. And I specifically got the iPhone 13. This is the camera I shot it on. I got that camera specifically because it has a good stabilizer mechanism in the camera lens that physically stabilizes the camera lens while you're moving it around. So I got it specifically for that reason because I knew I was going to do some handheld movements and stuff.
Nice. It really is impressive what you can do with a built-in stabilizer like that. You can get some
Yeah.
really smooth shots handheld now.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're like I said, they're a really robust tool, and I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this. But I think one of the reasons that having the smartphone camera is really essential, even if you're not using it to shoot the film, is for behind the scenes footage, maybe any kind of on set interviews, anything that can be used for publicity. Well, stills, if you're taking stills with it. I'm curious if you
Agreed.
find that to be a useful backup tool for those purposes too.
Yeah, I mean, my phone and my tablet are like my two most used filmmaking things aside from my camera. I use them to stay organized. I don't know, and yeah, the camera. I mean, I like to take photos. Like I as a side hobby, I do a lot of photography, and all of that is done on my iPhone camera because I just
Oh,
love
okay.
the look it can give me. Um, so in general, I love the iPhone camera. I also will say I think more filmmakers should be thinking about what an individual camera brings to their project. Because the way I look at things, like I have other movies I'm going to shoot on this iPhone. I have movies I'm going to shoot on the T2i. Nathan, I also got Blackmagic 6K Pro that we're going to start using here soon. So it's like it's just a project by project basis on what we decide to use for each project. So the iPhone brings a lot of qualities to the table that can be utilized for certain projects. I used it to make things feel more intimate and like you're there in the hotel room for hotel.
Yeah,
Some people have used it like I don't know if you've seen Unsane, Steven
yeah,
Soderbergh's
yeah.
his first iPhone movie. That movie utilizes it to make you feel paranoia and stress, and it's super effective in that way. I love Sean Baker's one of my favorite filmmakers. His Tangerine is incredible. That's like one of the first iPhone movies I ever watched. It's like the iPhone is one of the most versatile cameras ever. You can warp it and use it for different situations. It's super cool.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
it's also cool to have other cameras though. Like they all have different qualities.
I think it's a really good way of approaching it is looking what camera is right for what project. I can definitely think of times just for myself where I've been able to do things with a smartphone. In my case, I use a Google Pixel, but yeah, I mean the same idea.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Being able to do certain things, get things done quickly, and even if especially if you're filming in public, for example, and
Yes.
it calls less attention to itself if you're just grabbing some second unit type footage around town or whatever. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of reasons to consider it. And I'm glad you mentioned Soderbergh and his experiments with shooting on the iPhone, because coincidentally I've been really interested in that lately, and I was watching some interviews that he gave about the experience of making that, and then his most recent one with Netflix. I think it was called High Flying Bird. I want to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The
Um,
NBA, the NBA
yeah,
drama.
yeah.
Yeah.
But he made a similar point about being able to kind of come in close for certain shots that he couldn't have done with a traditional, camera setup. And there was even a behind the scenes photo of him with just the iPhone on a small little portable tripod. And it reminds me a lot of what you're saying about being able to do like that final shot by the window and everything, and just how you can really get in there, and it just opens up all these possibilities.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's a flat object. Like I was able to press this all the way up against the window and get that shot with it, like because you can get an ultra wide lens on a traditional DSLR, but you're not gonna get the actual camera itself is too bulky to actually get it as far back as I had it. So
Right.
yeah, there's a lot of pros to using an iPhone for sure. It's a project by project basis, but I am excited. I have two other projects I'm already in my head that I'm going to do on the iPhone, and I'm excited to do those.
That's great to hear. I think the idea of being inspired by technology is something that reminds me of your earlier comments about the early 2000s indie films and that moment, because like you said, shooting on handy cams and the mini DV format at that time was the big breakthrough, not only because
Hmm.
not only as a shooting format, but also for post production and being able to
Yeah.
edit, nonlinear editing and mixing the sound and all these things. So it felt like not only did it really democratize the shooting process, but also post production. And of
hmm
course, oh, so leading into that, that is, I guess that's kind of the last part of the process with hotels, your post production. I mean, you have it on YouTube in 4K. It looks excellent. The color grading, I think, is to my eye, it works really well. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you take this footage, you've captured all this footage, and now you're cutting it together, and how do you get it into that final look that you wanted?
Yeah, well, I shot using Filmic Pro, the app, which allows you to do a lot more with the camera than the stock iPhone uh, video camera app. It allowed me to shoot in it wasn't ProRes, but I was able to shoot in a flat color profile, which when you shoot in flat, you have a lot more control over the image in post. So I shot the whole movie like that, and I just found a LUT that I really liked that brought out the warmth in that room. Um, and I added that on top of it was a very simple process. I added that LUT, and then I used my 35 millimeter film grain that I like to use, and I put that over there, and that was it. Um, but I landed on the 166 aspect ratio because it's just for me that aspect ratio is like a warm hug. That's like the most that is like the most friendly aspect ratio of all the aspect ratios. Whenever I watch a movie in 166, I'm like, this is a really nice feeling. And I wanted, even though Hotel is about a dude who's stuck in a hotel room and he's dealing with a really frustrating and mentally exhausting situation, I wanted the hotel room itself to feel warm and inviting, and like that movie is a love letter to hotel rooms from Nathan and I, because Nathan and I we both like have a really odd love for hotels. Whenever we go to hotels, we have like a ritual that we do where we get some drinks, we put on TV, and we just relax and watch South Park in a hotel room, and like we don't ever do that outside of hotels. We're always busy and everything, so we get to do normal people things when we're in hotel rooms and stuff. So that was a big thing for me, was like I wanted to depict that hotel room in like a nostalgic, loving manner, because I love hotel rooms. It's just a very nostalgic feeling for me.
Well, yeah, there's definitely that sense of nostalgia if you have memories of going on like trips as a kid, your family road trips and that kind of thing, and staying
Yeah.
in hotels, or people traveling for work and that kind of thing. It's interesting how they do become this little temporary, home for a night, basically, a little,
hmm
home on the road. So yeah, that's a good point that there is this
Yeah.
special relationship I think that we can have with a hotel room, just
Yeah. Well,
purpose. Yeah.
yeah, and I wanted it to feel safe too. Like even though he's trapped in it, he's going to it for safety. He's
Mhm.
going to it to escape everything. So I wanted that hotel room to feel safe, and I wanted the audience to grow attached to it. So when we get to that final frame, there's a level of sadness that like, oh, the experience is over now. And like
Right.
and now someone else maybe comes into that hotel room and has a completely different experience, and the cycle just keeps going, because that's what hotel rooms are. They're just a midpoint for someone's travels in life. So I really wanted the audience to grow attached to it though, and so I wanted the movie to feel warm and cozy and inviting, and that 166 along with the color with the LUT that I used gave me
Uh,
that look.
yeah, I definitely think you do a good job of creating a strong portrait of that hotel room, making it into a character. I'm curious
Yeah,
if you could elaborate on something real quick, and I realize this may be very difficult to actually articulate, but you
yeah,
said that watching films in the 1.66 aspect ratio for you it's kind of the perfect the perfect aspect ratio. I think you described it as kind of comfortable.
yeah.
Is there Can you describe some of those qualities that achieve that for you?
I think it's a really cool midpoint between 4:3 and 185. It's like it's because like 4:3 is great for faces.
Mhm.
166 though is also great for faces, and on top of, because like 4x3, when you frame those headshots that everyone talks about with 4x3, you're not getting a lot of background, and that's why people say it's great for faces, because you're only focused on the face. But 166, you get that same effect, but with a little bit extra. You get to see what's around your character a little bit more while still maintaining that boxy nostalgic feel. And I don't know, it's just like, it's one of those things that's kind of unexplainable too. I just like it. It feels way more homey to me than any other aspect ratio.
So,
And it's
well,
less
certainly.
cinematic. It's less cinematic, but like I said before, I like that. Like sometimes the least cinematic approach, it makes it more cinematic in this weird backwards way.
Mhm. No, I mean it certainly works for the film. That's
Yeah.
interesting to hear your take on that. Um, so, at this point in the process, you've got the film shot, it's edited, it's been color graded. Can you talk a little bit about the process of releasing it on YouTube and what
Yeah.
you do to prepare for that and what your expectations are for it once it goes out into the world?
So Hotel was the last in a like process of me getting better at releasing movies properly, because I had to re-upload Hotel. There were some export errors, and I was just at that point I was getting used to a new full-time job that I had to do on top. Like I was uploading Hotel for the first time while I was clocked in at Dairy Queen. Like so there were some export issues. I had my wife watch it, but like she's not a filmmaker. Um and so I've had issues in the past with like either missing release dates or releasing when a movie is, when there's still issues with the export and stuff. And I can comfortably say now that I've cracked down, and I've gotten my process down better. Nathan and I got the Mentor Nathan's movie out on time, exactly when we planned, with time to spare, and that was an amazing feeling. Um, but back when Hotel came out, I still was ironing out that process, and I'm still trying to get better at it today. But I'm pretty confident that like we're past it now. I at least hope so. There's still one visual glitch in Hotel that drives me crazy, and I still go back and forth on whether I want to re-upload it one more time or not, but I don't know. It's hard for me because like the views don't really matter to me. That I just want the best version of my movie out there.
Yeah, I
But it
can
also
appreciate
sucks.
that.
It sucks to take down something over one like 2 second little thing. It drives me crazy, but
Well, maybe we'll see the what is it? The restored cut appear at some point. Yeah,
yeah.
no, I mean, I certainly appreciate what you're saying about having, wanting it to be exactly the way you want it once it goes out into the world. It's
Yeah.
that is a feeling of, it can be a little intimidating, I think, once it's out there and you want it to be out there forever and make sure it's exactly the way you want it. Um,
Hmm.
I'll just say, watching it, I didn't see anything that jumped out
Okay,
at me or
good.
distracted me. So I'm sure,
That
but I
makes
know
me
you can
happy.
see things that I'm not going to be looking for. But
Yeah.
as a viewer at least, it
Okay.
doesn't feel like anything out of place. But
Okay.
I'm curious, were you pleased with the response to it? I mean, has it been do you consider it a successful film for you now that it's out there?
Yeah, I mean, the way I've when I released Living with Trevor, my first movie, it got like a lot of people hated it, and that was when I started to realize, oh, this movie making thing is hard, and maybe people shouldn't be ripping movies to shreds, because like if I'm able to pour my entire soul into a movie and then get that type of movie review from it, then like maybe I shouldn't be ripping to shreds Taken 3 with Liam Neeson. Maybe I should cut Liam Neeson a break. But yeah, so like I've been through the ringer in terms of reception to my movies. And so I've gotten myself to a point where I don't make movies for the audience, weirdly enough. I make movies for me primarily, and then I let the audience come from that. Like I didn't make Hotel with reception in mind. I made Hotel for me, and I made it for Nathan. I made it for our cast, and if nobody else loved it, that's cool, because at least I love it. But yes, to answer your question, I appreciated how much, not it's not even like people liking the movie, it's the fact that people got the movie. That's the,
Mhm.
because like my previous movie, Not So Amazing, there was a lot of people that got angry at that movie because they weren't seeing it the way I was seeing it. And so it was really nice to make a movie and see that people were actually like tuning into the frequency I was trying to put out, and people understood thematically what I was trying to explore with that movie. That was the part, regardless of if you liked it or not, that's the part that I appreciate, seeing that people understood what I was trying to do.
Yeah, it's definitely a good feeling. And I think you
Yeah.
said the most important thing that you took away from it was that you were pleased with it, that you were happy.
Yeah.
And I think that is the most important thing. I'll tell you
Yeah.
just a quick story. After I first saw Hotel, I was having lunch with a friend of mine, and he and I used to make movies together back like, 15, 20 years ago. And I was telling him about the film, and I said, it's really it's inspiring to me to look at it because what you and Nathan are doing, and other filmmakers that I'm watching on YouTube, but especially with Hotel, that it is just such an assured piece of filmmaking. I mean, and hearing about your process making it just kind of reinforces that impression that I had of it. I mean, that you really went into this with a clear idea of what you were trying to do, rehearsing these actors, having the script, and then having the ability to pull it off, and using the camera that you had and all of this. So it's I think it's an inspiring project. I think to people looking to make films of their own. I certainly found a lot in it that I just, well, as I was telling my friend, we I said, it's really hard to imagine being able to do anything like this, even 15 or 20 years ago, because the technology's come so far. But I also think uh, for you being able to release it onto YouTube and to grow from film to film, it's a really exciting time to be making movies. And I think what you are
Yeah.
doing, and you and Nathan working together, is a really big part of that. So yeah, I think the Hotel is I would certainly say it works, every level, and just a really impressive movie. So congratulations.
I Thank you. I appreciate that a lot because I look up to you a lot. Like, so that means Endless August is one of my favorite folk films. So
Oh,
that
thank
means
you.
a lot. That means a lot to me that you like it as much as you do. Um, yeah, I think about Endless August all the time. I don't want to shift gears too much, but I just want you to know, like, Endless August is incredible. I love that movie so much.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to hear that. That was an experimental one for me in a lot of ways, and it's kind of going off of things that I see being done out there and all these new possibilities. So yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
it's getting back to what we were saying earlier. It's filmmaking really is just it's a constant process of learning, trying new things, exploring new ideas, and um,
Yeah,
yeah, so it's an exciting time for sure.
yeah,
Before we close out here, I wanted to ask. I did have one specific question, and I just thought this was kind of interesting. You mentioned you really like taking photos with your phone. Do you
yeah.
find that the work that you do with photography shows up in your filmmaking a lot? Do you see like a strong correlation between it?
I try to bring some of those sensibilities to my films. It's a lot easier to get really beautiful compositions and photos compared to film and video.
Mhm.
So it doesn't always work out that way, but Hotel is I will say this, Hotel visually looks very similar to what I get with my photos. So
Oh,
when I'm less stressed out and I'm just able to focus on one location and all that, it's a lot easier to get those really like nicely composed shots.
hmm.
But like I don't know. I love like Not So Amazing is a really scrappy. I intentionally shot that entire movie handheld. So I don't know. It's just say I guess my answer would be the same thing as like with cameras and stuff. It's just a project by project basis because I think sometimes those like really beautiful compositions sometimes take you out depending on what the project is. Sometimes you want a looser shooting style and you want the audience to get engaged in different ways and stuff. Sometimes you don't want your movie to be beautiful. Sometimes you want it to be kind of ugly and DIY and like I don't know. Like that's what I love about Sean Baker's work is like he juggles Tangerine, I would argue, is a pretty ugly movie, but intentionally so. It's like the most disgusting part of LA, running around with an iPhone, almost bleach orange the entire movie. Like it's not a pleasant movie to look at, but that's the point. And then he goes and makes something like The Florida Project,
Yeah.
which is like a gorgeous movie. And like I aspire to that. Like it's just different projects call for different visual quirks. And so yeah, depending on the project, yeah, I'm going for like those really cinematic compositions, but they're not every movie calls for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Before we sign off, is there anything about Hotel that you would like to add? Anything I did not ask you about that you would like to share with viewers?
No, just that like if you want to see the movie, it's for free on YouTube. That's all that's all I really need to say about it. I'm happy that people are still watching it, and I just love that it exists. That's what I say about all my movies, but like when a movie's done, it's just that feeling of like it's really cool that that movie that we just made exists and it's out there.
For sure. And I'll be sure to link it so people can find it if they're just coming across this interview. Um,
Awesome.
very last thing, is there any upcoming projects that you'd like to plug?
I am currently prepping my fourth feature film. I'm not going to say a ton about it, but it's going to be a pretty sharp left turn and it's going to be a horror film. So, it's going to be a pretty hard left turn from any of my previous work, but I'm excited and equal parts scared because it's a movie I I never in a million years thought that I would be making a horror movie, and now that I'm here and I'm probably 3 weeks out from filming it, I'm like, I just hope I don't screw this up. Is like the worst thing a horror movie can be is not scary. So I'm gonna try my best. That's all I can say. I'm gonna try my best to make it scary to me, and hopefully it works out. It's the only movie that I've made so far that there's even a hinge of a risk of me not liking it. So
Mhm.
it's but like good things happen when that risk is involved. So I'm inviting that risk. I'm accepting it, and we'll just see what happens. I'm not going to talk a lot about it till I know know for sure it's going to pan out the way I want it to.
Well, I'm
But
intrigued. I certainly want you to know you're welcome. If you'd like to come back on here at some point when that film is finished, and if you want to come back on and talk about it, you're certainly welcome. I'd love to hear more
of
about it when
course,
you're ready. Um, all right. Well, I guess that about covers everything with Hotel. I encourage everybody to check it out. I'll put the link along with this interview. And Caleb, thanks so much for speaking with me today. Like I said, it was really
of
great to
course,
finally talk with you in person. I've enjoyed our, little exchanges on Twitter and YouTube and
yeah,
everything, but this was a nice conversation with you. So thanks again.
agreed.
And yeah, best of luck with your upcoming project.
Thank you.
All right.